forward to this computer. All right.
Colin.
Hey, Carl, how's it going, man?
Good. Hey, just so everybody knows, I clicked on the link that Colin provided me, and I was over there 3 minutes early.
Oh, no.
3 minutes early. I was early to something, and I don't get any credit, so I want credit. So it's all Colin's fault.
We're going to give you credit for that one, Carl. And
Oh,
I will
normally I take all the responsibility to make the host look good, but Colin's on TikTok, so I just thought it'd be more fun to make fun of him a little bit.
Hey, you got to have some crazy thick skin to be on that platform. So throw as much as you want on me. I'm happy to fall on any sword.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's super good to be here.
Hey, thank you so much for joining us. So this is started out as the Michigan Next Gen FPA meetup. And then I bailed and went out to Los Angeles, and the Michigan FPA said, you're not getting out that easy. So what we've done is just really expanded our reach. And now we have people from California and everywhere in between, which includes you in between. So you're chatting with a lot of advisors that are either aspiring to become financial planners, maybe seniors or juniors in college, to people who have started their own practice, or some people in the first 5 to 10 years is kind of the demographic that Next Gen tries to capture and aim towards. So a lot of young, hungry advisors trying to learn from your wisdom. So thanks for taking the time.
Oh, my pleasure. Super excited to be here.
Is this the last call of the day, or you hit the trail?
Definitely the last call of the day.
Awesome. We'll make sure we get you out on time so that you at least have some sunlight. You can get out there.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome.
Where would you like to go?
Well, the first place, I think, and this is a very much an open conversation here, so anyone please feel free to chime in and ask a question, or type it in the chat so you don't lose your train of thought. But I like to kind of start with sometimes a question that people will end with, which is like, what is your number one piece of recommendation? And I'm actually going to steal your words from a podcast that you recently did with Brendan Frazier. And when he asked you one of the number one things that you'd recommend for young advisors to understand and learn, you said something super interesting. And I'd love for you to double click or expand on that. And you said that it's important for young advisors to understand that we are the guides among a changing landscape, not the defender of an outdated plan or an outdated map.
Yeah.
What the heck does that mean? There's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah. That's one of my favorite topics. So this answer may be long. Is that okay?
The floor is yours.
Yeah, if anybody wants to interrupt, just use the chat or throw something, whatever works. There is, and this has been bothering me for real, and by bothering I mean like a sliver underneath your skin that you're not quite sure is there, just sort of like, what's the right word? Annoying is not the right word. Animating, just sort of like, it's been a problem I've been thinking about for a really, really long time. And it's this false sense of precision that creeps into our industry. And I've spent a lot of time trying to understand like why and how come it happens. We're sort of trained that our job is to gather all this information. Like, it doesn't really matter what the question is, right? Like, should I remodel my house? Well, my answer's got to be, it depends. Let me build you a comprehensive financial plan, right? And it's a little bit like showing up at the ER in the emergency room with a knife in your leg, and you're like, hey, I got a knife in my leg. And the doctor's like, well, let's make sure your cholesterol's okay. And have you had any problems with your hearing? You're like, bro, just get the knife out of my leg. So so we start with this idea of like, let's gather all, no matter what the question is, let's gather all of this information, and then let's draw a 30, 40, or 50-year line, and let's do everything we can to be the best line drawers in the world. And I think that I used to downplay that on accident. I don't mean to. Like, drawing the line In other words, like building a financial plan is incredibly important work. And I think it's a technical, like we've got to be technical rock stars. Like we got to know how to use spreadsheets and calculators. But this emphasis on spreadsheets and calculators and drawing lines leads us to the conclusion that somehow if we just gather the right amount of information about not only the client, but also about all the assumptions we're going to make, inflation, standard deviation, correlations, and returns of every asset class just to get a Monte Carlo analysis. Then we got to do their lives, date of death, like their income. If we can just get that right, like I can feel like when I have this conversation with Kitsis, I can feel him like, oh, if I could just get that right, and if we just get it right, then somehow we would have an accurate line for the next 40 years. And then what happens, at least that's the way I was sort of taught, like my job was to draw that line. And then what happens is the only thing we know, and nobody seems to tell us this, the only thing we know for sure about the plan is that it's wrong. Like that's the only thing we know for sure. We just don't know how or why yet. And so because no one told us this, every time we bump up against the plan being wrong, and even more dramatic examples of like the plan blowing up, and it can blow up because of the markets, it could blow up because of the assumptions we made, it could blow up for a bunch of reasons. They could be systemic reasons, or they could be non-systemic individual reasons. Right? I thought I would sell the business. I mean, I can give you hundreds of examples from the last 20 years of plans I built. And then within a month, I remember one guy specifically was he had an offer for $50 million for his business. And within a month, the offer was gone and the business was worth nothing. Right? Like we had made plans on how he was going to donate the money and where we were going to move the stock of the business into a charitable, a CRUT or whatever it was we were going to do. And the trips he was going to take to Brazil to build an orphanage, like we had made plans around that. And then within a month, the whole thing fell apart and none of that was happening. Now, that's just called life. Like that's just reality. But the problem we have is if we orient our value around our ability to draw that line, when life shows up, we feel bad, like we failed somehow. Right? And that's when we get the defender of the outdated map model is specifically around portfolio design and performance, right? This is the easy way to see it. Like the example I just gave you around a non-systematic event related to somebody's life, that happens too. But the easy place to see it, the frequent easy place to see it is the market misbehaved, right? The market did something different. Client shows up and says, wait, I thought I was going to get 12%, 10% a year, and I'm down 30. And we feel somehow guilty. And the way that shows up often is like we start spraying people with facts and figures. Don't you know if you missed the 10 best days, right? Like we show them that chart. And you see this on Twitter a lot. Like whenever the market's down, you see a lot of us showing up saying, hey, don't be stupid. That would be stupid. Don't sell. The only time you make a loss is when you sell, like all these things. And that's all of us being defensive, like defending an outdated map. Now, the guide in a changing landscape is a much better job because it turns out it's reality-based. Because that other model of defender of map is we have somehow we fell into the trap of thinking our job was to deliver certainty, right? And certainty is really easy to sell because everybody wants it. The problem with it is it's impossible to deliver. You can't deliver certainty. And I was just realizing, I mean, I've been thinking about this for so long that maybe it was a couple of years ago, but I just realized, commented today that I saw that more often with my female clients than my male clients, this look in their eyes of like, really? You think you know what the next 30 years of my life is going to look like? Right? And there was this intuitive idea of like life changes. So defender of a map okay, guide in a changing landscape. Imagine being a mountain guide, right? And I've guided people in the mountains in scary situations, and I've guided people on rivers in scary situations. And I've been guided. I've been a guide and been guided. And I can tell you, before we go into the mountains, I'm actually I put on Twitter that I was training for a big objective and looking for people who wanted to come. So I've got like 3 advisors over the next 3 weeks flying here to spend 8 to 10 days in the 8 to 10 hours in the mountains with me. And we're going to scary places. Well, I know, like, I would not take them. They didn't sign up for a guiding service, but I still feel responsible, right? Like, these are my mountains, my backyard mountains. I'm taking them into, so I know exactly where we're going, right? If I'm guiding someone, you've got a detailed plan. Now, if we go out on one of those days, which has happened to me multiple times, we got one of those days, I'm going to look at the forecast before I go out. And guess what happens in the mountains sometimes? Weather shows up that was not in the forecast. Now, when the weather shows up, if it's scary particularly, what's the natural reaction? What's a human reaction from the person you're guiding? Like, they're going to be like scared, a little nervous, like, this is uncertain. What happened? They may even say to you, like, what's the deal? You didn't tell me there was going to be a storm. Hey, this isn't what I paid for. This isn't what I signed up for. That would all be a reasonable reaction, right? They need to vent. You know what would be unreasonable is for the guide to be like, dude, shut up. I looked at the forecast. This store, like, I don't know what your problem is. It's not going to be that would be an unreasonable approach. What would be a reasonable approach is for me to say, hey, man, I know, like, I looked at the forecast this morning and this wasn't here. I didn't expect it either, right? I know that storms show up in the mountains though, and I got a bunch of stuff in my pack. I don't know where we're going to go. I don't know what we're going to do, but I'm like super good at figuring out what to do when storms blow in. And I'm going to reach across, I'm going to grab him by the collar, stare him in the eyes and say, I've got you. Right? That's a different job. And it's I think one of the frustrations of people out there and ourselves is that we expect it to be this spreadsheet and calculator job where if we just get the inputs right. And the truth of the matter is, real financial planning is not about being precisely correct today. It's about being less wrong tomorrow. And the sooner we can realize that shifts yeah, I still got to be a technical rock star, but I've also got to develop, like, how can I be resilient? How can I make mission critical decisions in the face of irreducible uncertainty, right? Like, I can't get rid of it. Your job is to look people in the eyes and go, I got you, even though you don't know what's going to happen. Right? And just one last little piece on this. I remember in 2008, 2009, I had these clients, Dan and Barbara, who I had helped them make a really important decision based off a principle. I made them sell a stock that was 95% of their net worth. And the stock was at 40. And when they asked me why I was making them sell it, they were like, oh, you don't believe the stock's going to go up? And I said, no, actually the opposite. I promise the day we sell it, it will double. Right? And if we don't sell it, I promise it will get cut in half. That's not why we're doing this. We're doing it because it's a principle. You're 55 years old, you got 95% of your net worth in one stock. The principle is pretty simple. Like, we're supposed to be diversified. If you're going to be a client of mine, we're selling this. We sell it at 40, the stock goes to 2 over the next 6 months. He calls me Santa Claus for like 10 years. And I have to keep reminding him, like, Dan, I didn't know, it was just a principle, right? Well, fast forward to 2009, and they were on a cruise when everything melted down. And many of you may not, like, maybe you were around, I don't know, maybe you've just read about it. But it was super scary. Like you didn't know. It's quaint now. It's like, oh, cute, the global financial crisis. But like, at the time, you didn't know if the system was even going to survive. And Dan and Barbara come home. They call me from this cruise and they're like, Carl, we just got to the first port. Half the people left. Like, they're all retired. Half of them got on planes, flew home because they had, like, what's going on? And I was like, hey, Dan and Barbara, enjoy your cruise. But when you get back, come talk. Like, there's nothing for us to do right now. So I remember when they came back and I had to look them in the eyes and say, right, like we were broadly diversified, the portfolio mastered their financial plan. I had to look them in the eyes and tell them, like, there's a longer conversation, obviously, but at the end, I had to look them in the eyes and say, look, we're going to stay put. I've got you, right? And I remember for the first time in my career, leaving the conference room, I can remember what the door handle looked like. I can remember closing the door and thinking to myself, for the first time in my career, oh my gosh, I hope I'm right. Right? But that was one time, one of probably a handful of times where overconfidence, this is from some of the military doctrine literature, overconfidence can actually occasionally be a tool that you have to employ. Because, right, like you don't want your paramedic, if you're clearly in really bad shape and quite possibly are not going to even make it to the hospital, that's not what you want to be told. Like instead, you want your paramedic looking you in the eye saying, I got you, come on, stay with me, breathe, we're going to make it. Even though they're like, this person's going to die. So all I'm saying is that's much more of the job. Much more of the job is saying, so we still plot the line. Like we still do a really great comprehensive financial plan, right? We still use tools that allow us to make decisions, right? And of course, I'm sitting here in Element's office with the Element's poster behind me, right? Like tools like simple financial ratios that will allow us to help orient ourselves to where we are today, and from the literature, solve for the next local optimum. And I could go for another 20 minutes on complexity theory, and I'm happy to dive into it if it's helpful, but that's what guide in a changing landscape means. Because here, last thing, think like, imagine being a guide in an environment where the landscape's actually shifting too, right? Not only did you have to deal with the human piece, the storms, the weather, but the mountains moving, right? Like what a cool job, like to be, but we just have to get clear, because the old model of promising certainty and thinking that if we just get the right spreadsheet, we'll nail it, is leading to burnout on our part and frustration on the client's part, because we promise them certainty and we can't ever deliver. So I just think of it as reality-based financial planning.
So much to unpack there, and it's very tempting, Carl, just to say keep going. Really good stuff there. One of the it's funny when you change the situation of how obviously bad it is for advisors to be spraying, which by the way, I love that adjective there, or adverb there, verb rather, of people with facts. Because if you're a tour guide and someone's like, oh my gosh, rain, and then you just spray them with, well, only 50% of rain showers happen over this time, or you're a paramedic and the person's has a terrible heart condition and you're rushing them to the hospital and you're telling them, don't worry, 85% of people survive this. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, let's just focus on them now and give them encouragement to do the best they possibly can under these changing conditions.
Yeah, I think the concept of helping people orient where they are now, and I'll just tell you, like we live in a complex adaptive system, and again, that'd take me an hour to break that all down. If you don't know about complexity theory, go read about it. Right? We live in a complex adaptive system. All of our tools were built as if we live in a simple system. That's why there's a mismatch. It's not that the tools are wrong, they're just built for the wrong system. And in a complex adaptive system, both those words are important, complex and adaptive. In a complex adaptive system, the only way to navigate it, this is right from the literature, right? The only way to navigate it is to get clear about where you are today. And then here's the phrase, solve for the next local optimum. And really in our terms, that would be like, take the next step. And I like to think of it as the next micro action, like what's the smallest next step? And so it's really powerful to just understand, how can I get better at helping people orient where they are today? Not all this thinking around like, where are you going to be 30 years from now? Where are you going to be 5 years from now? No, like, what is this going to do? Now, where are you today? And then given this structure, these goals and values we have in your life, what's the next best step I can take? And if they get scared or worried, the solution to scared or worried about the next best step is to make the step smaller. Because a micro action is micro scary, right? So if there's fear or inaction, how can we make the step smaller? And I think that to me is, yeah, super, super powerful.
So people on this call or advisors listening to this might be thinking, wait a minute, I'm studying the CFP curriculum right now. They're telling me to gather this data. And now Carl's telling me the only thing we know for sure is that all of the analysis I just crunched is wrong. That's a little bit scary. Would you mind kind of sharing your idea and your belief of what real financial planning actually is?
Yeah. Yeah. And to be clear, like, so maybe this will help. Like, I've been asking for a long time, every pilot I ever meet, especially every commercial pilot, I started asking this question a while ago, 2 questions. The first question was, do you really create a detailed flight plan for every flight? These are commercial pilots, passenger pilots, right? And the answer I've gotten from every one of them, I got an answer from a private pilot that was no, and I would never fly with him. But the answer is yes. Like, I create a detailed flight plan for every flight. And the second question I ask is, how often does the flight go according to the plan? And the answer, without exception, has been never. Right? The flight never goes exactly according to the plan.
Wow.
So I've read somewhere, I tried to write this in my New York Times column, and the editor wouldn't let it through because I couldn't find the source. So I don't know if it's true, but I read somewhere that the space shuttle's technically off course like 98% of the time, right? It's course correcting. But having things like values and goals and gathering data and having a tool to use them in, right? That's what the CFP is pointing to, as far as I understand, right? Like, the actual output of a financial plan, that's the question, is like, the pilot still developed a plan. That plan was based on specific objectives and goals, and I would call those a statement of financial purpose. Statement of financial purpose and goals. And that statement of financial purpose gives us an orientation to where I think of it as 2 things. The statement of financial purpose, or a financial plan, provides a sense of direction and gravitational pull. Right? So there's this sense that if I have goals and they're out here, goals, I use that term loosely. If we want to talk more about that, we can. But at least I'm saying, like, no, I'm headed that way. And then we all know that setting some intention tends to give you a little bit of gravitational pull. So I'm not saying that gathering data is bad. I'm just saying we've had an overemphasis, like, especially when you understand the tools that we've been using. Like, go into any of your tools. Just go in and change the inflation rate from 3.1. Oh, really? That's what you had? Oh, that's interesting. What do you mean you didn't have 8.7? Huh? You guys were wrong. You're flat out, like, you know what I mean? Like, so go change it from 3.1 to just 4.5 and see what happens to that line, right? You know, you get this tectonic shift of like, whoa, you know, my potential range of outcomes just moved from this to $20 million. You know what I mean? Like, you've seen those Monte Carlo outputs. So really all those tools are telling us is we're in the ballpark. And that's important to know. Like, as a pilot, I want to know that that's the direction I'm going to fly. But the real work is in solving for the next local optimum. So the financial plan is totally worthless without the ongoing process of planning. Right. And so I think just we've put too much weight in the idea that the plan is a thing. Like one last example, we hired a new financial planner about 2 years ago, and she's like a superstar. And I think we're like 2 years into the engagement. I still don't have a financial plan. I'm like, where's my plan? Like, when's my plan? And then I realized, well, the reason I don't have a financial plan is because we talk on Thursday. And by Monday, everything's changed. Like I took on a new project, we did a different book, I got a new job, my kids decided to do this, we're moving to New Zealand. Like, how do you plan on building that into the plan? So I think there's much more. Real financial planning to me is about navigating a complex environment and helping people align their use of capital. And when I use capital, it always has an asterisk: time, money, energy, and attention. Their use of capital with what's actually important to them. And that process never ends, right? That never ends. We're always on a little off track, on a little off course. And that's to me how I think about real financial planning.
So when it comes to actually implementing and kind of meeting people, and I think this might be a pretty decent layup for what's behind or over your shoulder here with elements. I sent you actually in the conversation earlier today, the difference between like high value advisors in planning, or high cost of financial planning versus maybe a lower, more scalable model. And ever since I got out of that call for the last like 2 hours here, I've just been thinking about that. And I actually made a little bit of a drawing. I'm almost too embarrassed to share my screen and share it.
Well, then you have to.
What's that?
I said, then you have to. Like, we'll all wait. We're not going anywhere.
All right, fine. I'll do it. So I knew that you were going to describe financial planning that way. And then I said, okay, if this is real financial planning, which is the combination, the overlap here, or the intersection of use of capital and what's important to you or your values, purpose, how do we kind of break that down? What goes into that? And I kind of always thought it was making big decisions, creating the big financial plan, all of the big pieces. That's kind of what I envisioned real financial planning, or like the traditional financial planning, as the making the $10,000 tax saving decision is kind of here. And then of course we have the goal monitoring and things like that, which is great. You're vaguely on track. But I feel like what's kind of in the middle and is often overlooked is meeting clients where they exist today, and being able to pick up the phone and being able to answer a question, because these big financial one-page plans and deliverables, I mean, I do this twice a year for clients, but they rarely have questions exactly, on July and November when I deliver my financial plan to them. If only they had questions at those exact times, right? Semi-annually, perfect. So this monitoring has kind of become a really interesting thing that I've been thinking about, and not necessarily as a high value $10,000 annual plan or a $1,000 subscription fee. To me, Elements, as an example, or any type of data aggregator that makes things super, super simple and can be tracked very easily, to me feels like almost that beautiful middle ground. And I'd love to hear your opinion on that.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting, right? Like, I just think that all those, I would just, I don't know if you guys should think about this, but if it was me, here's what I would be thinking about is, like I saw even in that sheet, retire at 55. We just have to remember that, like, those are all guesses. While I was that's why I was toying around with this like conversation around goals. Goals are really just guesses. We have no idea. And if you haven't spent any time on like Rene Girard's work around mimetic desire, Luc Brigeaux's book Wanting, his new book Wanting, is ridiculously good at this. It explains this concept, but the underlying concept is humans don't know what they want, right? We're just mimicking machines. From the youngest age, we don't know. We look to other people to teach us what we desire. It's all around desire. We don't know what we desire. From the very youngest age, we are taught by looking at other people. And Instagram, of course, has just made this 1,000 times worse. So when you make a claim like, I want to retire at 55, you actually don't know that. That was just something that you read somewhere, or maybe your parents did it, or maybe you're, like, you have no clue. You want to go on a vacation every year to the beach. Cool, maybe, right? Like, and that's not how I would phrase it to a client. I would, what I would be really super curious about doing, what I would get better at, if I don't know if I'd get better if I were you, but if it were me, what I would get better at would be being curious about those things. Like, oh, that's interesting. When did you first decide that that was a goal? Like, where did you first learn about that? Going to the beach every year. Oh, that's why. Hey, why do you think that's a goal? Why is that important to you? What are you hoping to accomplish? What's the underlying thing? Like, what's important about going to the beach every year? Oh, time with the family. Like, you're trying to get at these underlying things, because it turns out there's lots of ways to implement time with the family, right? You've just anchored on time at the beach or retiring at 55. So what does that have to do with, okay, great, we still set this goal, retire at 55. Great, we put this thing out there. And then the financial monitoring piece and the ongoing course corrections and the conversation and the changing landscape, all the rubber all meets the road here. Like, we went to the beach this year. How was it? It was a little more complicated than we thought it would be. Like, I'm not so sure, like, that was worth, like, I every client I have ever dealt with, something like this has happened where they had a really important goal that they learned wasn't so important, or that something else was more important. Like, turns out we've really like, for the last 5 years, we've really valued the ability to live anywhere, right? So he's 4 years in New Zealand, a year in London, and that's not because we had endless supply. Like, it was worth the trade-off. Like, we spent our savings to pull this off. You know what I mean? Like, right now, oh, geez, it's part of your plan that you guys can live anywhere and travel. Actually, we're really enjoying getting the house remodeled, and maybe we're going to plant some trees. I'd love to see if they grow. Like, maybe we'll be stable. Like, so my only point is that this is continually changing. And even the part about what's important, that part of the aligning your use of capital with what's important to you, the what's important to you is moving. So that's why I say it never ends. That's why the job's so awesome. So when people often say, like, what am I just had this conversation last week with somebody you would all know, actually, you would all recognize this person's name, and they are running a big business that actually a couple, and that one of them is possibly for sale. And he was saying, I really want to sell it because it would give me financial stability, but I have no idea what I'd do with my life. Like, I have no idea what I would do. He's like, how do you figure out what you would do? And I have this conversation once a month. Somebody comes to Park City, Utah, has read my work, asked to meet. We go, I sit at the same table at this coffee shop because I want the table to have like emotional patina. And they sit down and they say, I just sold my business for $50 million or $10 million or $100 million or whatever. And I'm super miserable. And the question becomes, like, what do I do? Well, you guess. You know what I mean? You say, I think I would like to volunteer at the play. You go do it. What do you learn when you go do it? So this is all just solving for the next local optimum. And how does a financial monitoring tool help with that? Well, it gives you ratios, quick ratios, which we happen to call financial vital signs, wrapped up in this beautifully designed scorecard that allow you to quickly orient on where you are today, and then give you some ballpark idea of what the future looks like based on decisions you make. And I would just suggest that ballpark is all we've got. Like, we can pretend like we all have physics envy. We can pretend like we have better than ballpark, but we don't, for all the reasons I talked about. And if you doubt me, again, go change your inflation number from 3.1 to 4.7 and see what it looks like. So that's how monitoring, at least that's the way I think about it. Is that helpful?
It is. It definitely it highlights to me the importance of quick updates, and that things are constantly changing, because the drawing that straight line is a great guess. I think we probably shouldn't stop drawing the straight line, at least to make sure that you're within the field goal, is kind of what I've been using as language with clients, that you're at least in the right range. You know, if you need to be pointed perfectly straight north, well, we just want to make sure you're not going south. You know, maybe you're going northeast or a little bit northwest. We'll keep slowly getting you back on track.
Well, let me just interrupt real quick and mention something that I think is really important. Like, the world has changed since those tools were built. Those tools were built during a time when college was the golden ticket. Then you stepped into a 30-year career and you had a pension and you retired at 65 and you died when you're 68. That was when those tools were built. Now you're all likely to change careers 7 times. The chance of you having one house with a white picket fence are almost none. Your income will probably be lumpy, right? And you might be in a situation where you earn a bunch of money for 2 years and then you earn nothing for 6 months, and then you earn, like, your life expectancies in quote unquote retirement age is 20 years. So it's a completely different world. What that generates is a lot more questions more often because of that quote unquote volatility of our lives now. Like, many of you probably don't even know what a pension is. You know what I mean? Let alone work with anybody that has one. So this volatility of our lives means that we have more questions more often. And if every time I have a question, you've got to update your comprehensive financial plan, man, that's going to be hard for you to serve very many people. Right? And the question is, do we even need, in many cases, it's overkill anyway. So having the lightest weight tool, it's not financial planning light. It's fit for purpose financial planning, generated around the reality of today's world, right? Where things are changing so quickly. I've got questions like with my financial planner, it makes no sense for her to hit print ever. You know what I mean? Because literally 3 days later. So I think that's just important for us to understand.
I really like that. Do you think then that does my thought of like using elements not necessarily as like a financial planning light? It's like you could use that for every single client, and then you have the behemoth e-money if you really need to go in and do 1 or 2 big financial analyses to help them make a decision. And that usually only happens or maybe is required once a year, once every other year, twice a year, if that. Like, and then having that program, something that meets them where they're at for quick updates. Maybe is there a world, is it like, hey, having both is almost kind of a wonderful tool?
Yeah, sure. Like we all have clients. I had clients that, did have pensions or did have money. And like Carl, I remember Jerry and Vera, right? $5 million. They wanted $80,000 a year. They wanted $5,000 a month delivered to their mailbox in a check. Right? Like, I didn't even know how to do that, but $60,000 in a check. You know what? Jerry and Vera have they've lived in the same, but they were part of Tom Brokaw's Greatest Generation.
Right.
They lived in the same house. Well, look, we've got a line drawn. We update it once a year. Great. But most of my clients were like, hey, I got this opportunity to do this. How would that affect things? Right. So I just think we don't think of elements, and this isn't an element sales call, but we don't think of elements as financial planning light. We think of it as purpose-built planning that allows us, I got into this business. I didn't get into this business to help somebody decide on their, how to maximize tax deductions on the private jet. That's not why I got into this business. But it seemed like that was as soon as I got into this business, that was what everybody was telling me the goal was to serve people with really complex, high net worth families. And I did actually get the question from a family CFO, Carl Dave was his name, has asked us will you help me figure out the best way to get the best tax write-off for the jet? And I said, you know what the best thing to do is fly Southwest. And I lost that client, right? And I was happy. So I think what we think is like, look, there's 99% of the population that can be served by a different tool. If we were to scrap everything so we had no sunk cost, and we were to build a new tool with no sunk cost, what would we build? Well, in other parts of the financial world, we use quick ratios. And certainly in the business world, my daughters in private equity, like, all they talk about is ratios.
Mm-hmm.
So it gives us a quick, objective way to orient ourselves on where are we and what impact will this decision have. And it's quick. The cost to acquire and cost to serve is super low. So I can now scale and help the people I got into this business to help in the first place. So anyway, that's how I think about it. I want to make sure, given that we've got 16 minutes left, that any questions, any place you'd like to go, Colin, you or anybody else, just drive the bus there. I'm happy to talk about anything.
Yeah, sure. I guess we can open it up for another question. I know I did want to at some point, because it's super interesting to ask why you think it should be illegal to ask someone what their goals are. That's such a great, like, mind-boggling.
Yeah, let's talk about that real quick. I really don't think that we should use that term, because no one knows. You're going to learn this really quick if you haven't already learned it. Like, no one knows what their goals are. And they don't like it. Like, as soon as I even say the words, I can feel tension between my shoulder blades. Like, me personally, like right now, like, goals. Oh no, I'm supposed to have those. Oh geez, I better just look on Instagram real quick and see what my goals are supposed to be. And I'm just using Instagram as a metaphor. Like, maybe it's the snappy talk or whatever it's today. Snip snap or snappy chat, snippy talk. So I quickly better figure out, what did my parents say the goals should be? Yeah. I don't know what my goals are. So rather than ask a client, what are your goals? Let's teach them what it means to have a goal. And that's a conversation that stems out of a conversation around financial purpose. And, financial purpose is more like, what does money mean to you? Or Bill Bacharach's question, why is money important to you? Or if you've got the skill to do it, George Kinder's questions, which are amazing. Or some of the stuff around money quotients work. Like, you get to that level where somebody says, like, my statement of financial purpose, that's what I call it. I have a dream that there will be a time where every client has a statement of financial purpose. I actually have a dream that will be like, you won't even remember this, but Intel Inside. Intel was a chip maker, and they were the first people ever to market chip makers to market directly to consumers. So you would show up at the computer store, Radio Shack, and say, I want a computer with an Intel chip. I have a dream that there will be a day when consumers show up to financial planners and say, hey, I need help with my statement of financial purpose. And if you don't know how to do it, they'll go find somebody else. The statement of financial purpose, mine says, time with my family, mainly outside, and service in my community, my church. Well, if I tell you that, it's really easy for you to say, hey, Carl, let's put some framework around time with your family. What does that look like? And I could say, well, geez, I'd love to coach my daughter's soccer team. Oh, okay, how much time would that take? Oh, it'd be 2 hours a week. So I'm building framework. And then once I write down, hey, Carl, I've written all this down, coach your daughter's soccer team. Would it be okay if we call that a goal? That's much different than what are your goals? Because if you'd asked me what are your goals in my intake form in the lobby, I would have never written down coach my daughter's soccer team. So I could give you lots of examples of that where we go from, let me give you one more real quick. There was a client, her name was Julie. It was Julie and Steve. Julie was an ER doctor. This is in my book, The One-Page Financial Plan. This is the story, different name because I changed the name, but their real names were Julie and Steve without giving you the last name. Julie's an ER doctor. She says, I asked her what's important about money to her. She says time. No, she said flexibility or something. I said, what's important about flexibility? Like, I'm shortcutting the conversation for time here, but what's important about flexibility? She's like, longer pause. She said, what's important about freedom? She says, flexibility. What's important about flexibility? Longer pause. And this was obviously much more conversational. Longer pause. She says, time. I was like, oh, time. Tell me a little bit more about that. Time could mean different things to different people. Like, and in fact, in a minute, I want to put some framework around what you mean by time. And when we write that down and put framework around it, we'll actually just call it over here on the sheet over here that I call goals, right? So we're just kind of hinting at that. Tell me about time. What would be important about that? Longer pause. she gets a little emotional and says, Carl, I'm an ER doctor. I'm the managing partner at the biggest emergency department in the city. I just want to have time to have a family. And right now I don't even have time to think about it. Okay, let me ask you a question. How am I supposed to do my financial planning job if I don't know that? Like, and then the second question is, tell me exactly where that would have come up in your risk tolerance questionnaire or your intake form called goals. Like Julie would have said, no, she wouldn't have. In fact, from the look on Steve's face, I'm not sure they'd had this conversation, right? So that to me is what I'm talking about when we say, let's not use the word goals, let's show people what it means to have a goal. So now I can say to Julie, okay, great. What would it mean to have time? Like how, well, you know, I want to do this, and this. Okay, what else would need? Well, I'd need to be, Steve and I would want to feel like we're on track for retirement. Okay, cool. What would that mean? Let's put some framework on it. Okay, what else would have to happen? Oh, my partners at the emergency department would have to be on board. Okay, have a conversation with partners. That sounds like a goal. Okay, goal, right? Like now we're getting really tactical, saying here are the goals that you need to make these things happen. The goals are purely in service of the statement of financial purpose, right? And then of course we move upstream as we go from goals to process and then even to product. And of course, product is the least important part of the whole thing. And it's the place everybody else in this world starts, right? Like I'm going to sell you a product and then try to jam your goal into the product. And we real financial planners start at the other end. Hopefully that's helpful.
That was incredible, Carl. Thank you so much. And for the young planners on here, Carl just shaved off like 5 years of awful conversations that it took me to learn to have these type of conversations, because that was amazing. I used to just ask, what are the goals? And I'd get the most basic answers that someone would think they should tell a financial advisor. And you just got me goosebumps sharing that story. That was really special.
Thank you. What other questions? Cody, why don't you jump on and ask that question? Help me understand what you're asking.
Yeah, so I mean, so it was kind of timely for where you were. But I completely agree with you in terms of financial planning. The way it's taught in the CFP curriculum is like you're working with a client who's going to work at 65 or they're going to retire at full retirement age, claim Social Security, have their pension. Like, you know, we're focused on marginal tax rates rather than effective tax rates. And as you know, somebody who's serving kind of the not just DIY, but like early retirement, like the FIRE movement, who in a way it's just like people who are, I kind of consider them like they're entrepreneurs of their own lives, right? Where like I have to treat it like I've already tweeted like 3 times while you were talking, Carl, just from like, you know, content is the best form of content is just documenting, conversation. But I said, think about what your life and goals looked like 3 years ago. And somehow we think our life and goals will look similar 3 years from now. Like how much is, changing over time. But she's saying that not only is like the curriculum focused on that traditional, like kind of outdated way of living, especially like pensions, et cetera, but also said that the financial planning process that we learn, we used to learn it as like EGADM. And, the question I had here is that when you're talking about that tool, like I know Elements, for example, is that's more focused on like the monitoring, like the ongoing monitoring and adjustment, or is that like the place? So just backing up a little bit, I believe that data gathering, the process of reviewing financial documents is like the most underappreciated part of what we do, because I think that when we're reviewing like these black and white documents, like tax returns, Social Security statements, pay statements, you're learning about their family. Like if you look beyond the numbers, right? And there's like been some incredible conversations that come out of reviewing that. So I say like, is the technology you're talking about a replacement for not just the tools, but also a replacement for the process that we've been taught?
Yeah, it's a super good question. And I don't know that I love the word replacement, but I do love the idea of it allows us to think about it differently. And I do think like even the FIRE, like it's such a great example of all this. Like, how do you really know that you want that? You don't really know that you want that. And you're going to learn if you do. And guess what? We're going to be there to adjust. Well, what tool are we going to use to help you adjust? right? Well, it turns out I want to go back to work, or we want to travel. Well, what tool do we really need to update your entire plan to get the answer to that? Or could we just have some set of ratios that help us understand if we're in the ballpark? So I don't know about replacement, but I do know, and this is just between us kids, like don't tell anyone. I do know that if we started from scratch, I'm not sure we would build the same tools, right? Like we just have a huge sunk cost problem. Like we're all invested in it. We've got a legacy issue problem. Would we really, the tools we've got are purpose built intentionally for, I'm just going to oversimplify, 1% of the population. You know, and then we can get more efficient at using the same tool. And if we can get more efficient, then all of our focus on serving other markets, the 99% has been around, can we get more efficient at using the same tool? And the question we're asking is like, should the tool be changed? And should the business model be changed? Like I'm a huge fan of thinking about like subscription-based and membership models. Like I as soon as you could, I would be thinking of yourself as an intellectual property owner, business owner. Like you're a knowledge product owner, not a financial planning firm owner. And, you know, packaged wisdom, the ability to do group coaching, one-to-many, and then one-to-one on demand as needed is such a powerful model. We've seen that in other places. We're just all saying, no, there's only one process and one tool and one way to do it. Can we just get more effective? Why can't we get more people to just stick? Why can't we just get more CFPs that only want to earn $30,000 for the rest of their lives to serve this down market group? Well, how long is that going to last? If I know if I just move up market, I will make 3 or 4 times that. Right? There's more demand than we know tons of advisors have wait lists on the high end, right? Wait lists on the high end. Well, you're quickly going to go there if you can't find a different way to do it. And then we're back to the private jet problem. So I don't know about replacement, Cody. Like it's a really good question. I'm hesitant to say replacement. I am, but I do think an easier way to think about this was imagine we wake up tomorrow and all existing tools are gone. I call this the overnight test. I use it with clients all the time. Like you wake up tomorrow, all your assets have been sold. Which ones would you buy back? Right? If all the existing tools were gone, which ones would we build back? I don't know the answer to that question. I'm pretty sure we wouldn't be using tools that were originally designed for rocket, the atomic bomb, which is where we got Monte Carlo from.
Well, Carl, I was going to say one thing. When new planners talk to me, one thing I say is, especially if you're going to launch your own firm, what I see is that a lot of people are negotiating bottom up rather than negotiating top down with being intentional about how they build whether it's their business or their brand. Like they're kind of asking for permission. And like, so before I left my last firm, like one thing I kind of got frustrated with how, again, like there was just I kind of had that attitude, like adapt or die in a way, kind of negatively. But I just said, you know, everybody write down your process, like everything you do during the day, and then say, why do I do it that way? And if the answer is because it's always been done that way, or I don't know why, then that gives you automatic permission to change it.
Yeah.
But I feel like even like as new, you know, I know we aren't all business owners here, but like even if you're not a business owner, like you can kind of think that way of how can I negotiate? Like if I were to just everything just like goes away, my process is like, oops, it went into the trash can and I can't recover it. Like if you were to start from scratch today and be intentional about how you build your business or how you build your role at your firm, like how can you negotiate top down? Like I think that the industry would completely change, or you know, the whole industry profession debates and all the, you know, whether we're like doctors or whatever. I think a lot of that wouldn't matter if we were just intentional about just saying like, I'm going to build my business or serve clients in the way they specifically need to be served.
Completely. I think that's actually the claim we're making here is at Elements, at least, is what if we purpose built a tool? Right? Instead of like tweaking existing tools, what if we just said, forget it? What's the thing that needs to be done? So yeah, I love that. Any other questions before we wrap up? Anything else anybody wants to ask? Don't make me call on people.
I guess my question is, if we want to get better at tax, we go study for the EA, right? I want to be better at this, but I'm like so overwhelmed of like, okay, how do I start implementing some of these things? I don't know. How do we make this happen?
No, I think it's a good question. I would just practice. I would practice curiosity, right? Like I would practice, because at the heart of this, like forget the tools that we use or the arguments about fee models or any of that stuff for a minute. The heart of it is like, how can I really, my biggest fear for the industry is the old Stephen Covey quote that you're going to spend your whole career trying to climb a ladder only to find out it was leaning against the wrong wall. And my biggest fear is that we do that for clients. Like we spend all this time optimizing for the wrong thing. And all this time focused on the wrong thing. Then there's some great research in Russ Allen Prince's book, The Private Client Attorney. They did a survey of high net worth families. So this was the population. They were high net worth families that had paid for an estate plan. And I can't remember what the number was, but it was a substantial, like it was reasonable. It was like real money that they had paid. They got the plan done and then they didn't implement it. And I remember seeing this all the time. Like, wait, you have this trust document done and you haven't done anything with it? The question they asked was, why didn't you do anything with it? I mean, you paid for it. Why didn't you do anything with it? And the answer is almost heartbreaking, right? Especially if you think about it, that we're making the same mistake. The answer was, it didn't reflect what I wanted. And so my biggest concern is we're optimizing for a bunch of stuff that people don't really want in the end. How do you solve for that? Well, you get curious. You ask more questions. Oh, I want to retire early. Tell me more about that. Well, that's interesting, right? And that process never ends. So if I were like, how do you make these things happen? I think you practice that. Like you can do simple things. Like I used to practice trying to have a client meeting where that everything that came out of my mouth had to end in a question mark. I used to practice that one. I used to record my clients' meetings with permission, of course, just the audio. And then I'd have somebody on my team listen to them and time the amount of time that I was talking versus them. And I was at a goal to get it out of a 60-minute meeting. I had a goal to get it down to 5 minutes of me talking and 55 minutes of them. Now I never got there, but the goal had gravitational pull. So, I got better. Like when I first did it, I think I was talking for 50 minutes. I was like horrified when I got the first time I realized, and I think I got that down to, maybe I was talking for 15. So those are the kind of things I would practice. Find a list of questions you're really comfortable asking. Get really good. Go listen to Terry Gross, her interviews, or go listen to Krista Tippett. Who else is really good is Brian Koppelman on The Moment. Brian Koppelman will ask one question and then he'll spend 20 minutes saying things like, go deeper, keep talking, tell me more. My favorite question, this is one last suggestion, go read Michael Bungay Stainer, which is mbsworks.com. You can find his website at mbsworks.com. And I think it's called The Coaching Habit. His book, and he was on our membership call. His favorite thing is simply to say, and what else? Oh yeah, I really want to, and what else? And what else? He just kept, so I'd practice that. I would take cues from the coaching side of the world and then add your technical skill to that. And then be crazy. Take a day a month to just brainstorm on like, what would I build if I had no priors, right? I got rid of all the priors and I just built what I want. And then like, maybe you're not in a position to do that right now. And that's just reality. Like I wasn't super early, but don't let go of that. Like don't let go, because what happens is you guys just get the crap beat out of you. Like all this altruistic, this is what I really want to build stuff. Oh, cute kid. That's not the way we do things around here. Like, okay, you play chess with that. Like, thanks, boss. That sounds great. I'll take care of that. but you always go back to that thing that you dreamt of when you first got to this industry, and be playing chess the whole time. Like every move here, okay, boss, that's not the way we do things around here. I'll go do it the way you want it. Every move you're making here is just so that you can finally do the thing that you really, really want to do. Just don't let that be beat out of you. So that's how I would do it. Looks like we're out of time. You guys are amazing, amazing. Like, please don't forget, the world needs you more now than we've ever needed you. Don't get caught up in all the, at least don't let any of the debates about what's the right way to do it or wrong way to do it beat you up to the point where you decide to, if you ever need to think like, I can't handle this industry anymore, call me. Like, we need you to stay. I understand if you have to leave, right? But we need you to stay, especially those of you who don't look exactly like me, right? Like, we especially need your voice and your perspective. So please know that if I can be helpful, I'm here, and you can always find me on Twitter or hello@behaviorgap.com or the Society of Advice, either one of those. Cheers.
Carl, you're amazing. Thank you so much. This was really, really helpful.
Yeah, my pleasure. Super honored you'd ask. See you, everybody.
Thanks
Thanks,
so much.
Carl.
Thank you, Carl.
Bye.
All right, let me hit stop record a sec.